Welcome to Unite Now, where we bring unity to you, wherever you are.
Welcome, everybody. This is part 2 of our session with FPS Creator Kit. My name is Brian Kenney, and I'm going to be hosting along with Alexei Othenin-Girard. How are you, Alexei?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to see people. Hopefully, we have a lot of people who are coming here who were here last week because this is part 2 of our Learn Live Beginner series. We started working with the FPS Creator Kit last week, and this week we're going to keep moving forward with that FPS Creator Kit. And then next week, we're going to do something really cool. We're actually going to get a chance to see people's levels and give some feedback, both from a design and from a technical standpoint. I'm Alexei, that's Brian. We're going to be walking you through all of the material that we're seeing here. We also have some great moderators, Daniel Sanchez, Mara Blumen, Alejandro Diaz, as well as Nicholas Borromeo and Ethan Bruins, all incredible people who are very well versed in Unity and can help you with your questions.
Yes, sir. So let me take you through, guys, some housekeeping items. Here's today's session outline. We are going to be taking care of a little introductory stuff. Now, if you were at last session, this is great. That's awesome. We're just going to pick up where we left off. If you did not make last session, that's okay. We are, going to go. If you go back and watch session 1, you can catch up. But if you want to just stick around and hang out and watch, if you didn't do session 1, that's fine too. You're always going to learn something new. And FPS Kit is pretty amazing stuff. So.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you haven't seen session 1 yet, stick around for this session, watch through to the end, then go back, see session 1, and then you'll be able to do kind of like all of the steps in order.
And then after that, we are going to be, I'm going to take you through a brief introduction of what's going on with what we did last week and what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to be adding some interesting game mechanics. We're going to be adding a locked door and key. We are going to be creating an endpoint trigger where you end your game. And this is what I'm excited about. You might have seen it in the chat earlier that there was a question there. What's your favorite FPS weapon? But we're going to be customizing a player weapon based on some prefabs that were already made for you and already included in the FPS kit. And then finally, we are going to go through how to build the game, how to make it so you can just share it with your friends and share it with on our Unity site. So for next session,
FPS Connect site.
We can have our Q&A and have some fun with these things and see what you guys have created through the first 2 sessions.
I would say the section on creating an endpoint trigger, that is, I think of all of the stuff that's in here, that creating an endpoint trigger, I would pay special attention. That is working with something that we call trigger volumes in Unity. It's a very, very powerful technique, and it's one that we use all the time in game design. So, the door and key is really useful. Customizing the player weapon is really useful. Building the game is incredibly useful. But that endpoint trigger, I would say, if I could highlight one part of this lesson that's going to be most valuable and most important, really dial into that creating an endpoint trigger, because it's a technique that you can use to drive all kinds of interactions in your game.
And I know Alexei is a classroom teacher, and so am I. And one of the things I love about Unity is the watch, do, and explore. Mm-hmm. As a classroom teacher, that's like if you are exploring on your own, but learning by doing first, you're gonna learn faster, and it's gonna be more fun for you. So, Lexi's gonna take you through a stop. You'll see that stop sign icon right there. When you see that, just go ahead and watch, take in what Alexei's saying, and then once you see the green thumbs up, you will be doing, and you're going to go through the steps, and all the moderators are there in the Q&A to help you guys out. So make sure you're asking lots of questions, and they'll get to you as soon as possible. Those guys are amazing. They're really, really good at Unity, so make sure you're asking lots of questions.
Here's a little quick window on Zoom layout. Yeah, I think like most people, I think at this point are pretty good at organizing their Zoom windows. definitely just leave yourself enough space that you can see our screens.
So with the Q&A panel, a couple ground rules: be respectful and constructive. We are going to be using 2019.3. It doesn't matter what the dot is after that. As long as you got 2019.3, you're going to be good. Make sure you're following along with Unity 2019.3. And as said before, in other sessions and today, well, I'm going to say it now. Make sure you are, if you want to go back and watch this, if we're moving too fast, moving too slow, make sure you give us some feedback in the chat. If you need to go back and watch, you can watch the recorded message back on the Unity Learn Live site. We can send you that link in the chat. There you go. Let's keep going. Let's get going.
Somebody asked in the Q&A, what if you have 2019.4? I believe that versions after 2019.3 should work just fine. So you should be okay. I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure that it'll work fine. It's just versions earlier than 2019.3 might have some trouble. Okay. Oh, so Ethan notes 2019.4 is not out yet. So if you have 2019.4, how?
How'd you get it? Well, give me some of your secrets.
Yeah.
That must be nice. If you're new here, if you're lost, like I said before, catch up on the recordings. The link to the assets is going to be in the chat window. So if you're not getting those, post that question in the Q&A. We'll get them to you as soon as possible. If you're here and you missed last session, it's okay. Follow along. It's great. The assets are designed to pick up where we left off, but it is highly recommended that you go back and watch session 1.
Really quickly, talking about the Creator Kit, again, for people who have sort of worked with it before, great. Otherwise, if you're just getting into it, that's exciting too. The Creator Kit is a group of assets and scripts that have been made for us to help us build a simple FPS game with some good interaction and some interesting kind of back and forth in terms of mechanics and design without needing a ton of either Unity knowledge or any code. So we can build levels, we can build enemies, we can build weapons, we can build interactions with the Creator Kit without needing code. So it's really a great way to dip your feet in to Unity, get the basics under you. So if you have not seen session 1, watch this session, go back, watch session 1. There's a deeper introduction to the FPS Creator Kit, as well as some basic Unity navigation information, stuff like that, how to get around in Unity. So if you're just dipping your toes into Unity now, definitely go back and watch session 1.
You know what, Alexei? I'm going to post a link in the chat for our FPS Connect group. Highly recommend that you guys get in there and if you got questions, you can share your concerns there, or share your feedback there.
Yeah.
Interact with other people.
And that Connect group, again, that Connect group is going to get really important next session because I think that's where we're going to be bringing people's submissions in from and talking about kind of from a design standpoint, what are people doing? How are people using these tools? So very exciting stuff there. Okay, so session goals. Like we said before, we're going to add a locked door and key. We're going to create a level endpoint to trigger the end of the game. We're going to customize a character weapon, and we're going to create a build of the game to share with others. So let's just dive in, I would say. Adding a locked door and key. So this is, again, we're going to be drawing on some assets that Unity has already developed for us so that we don't have to use any code. We don't have to build any assets. We can just sort of plug and play stuff that's already there. But by using this stuff, we'll see some of the ways that Unity makes associations between objects in a scene. So here is my FPS Creator Kit level. For people who were here again last week, this should look a little familiar. I did go in and redesign it a little bit because I'm a game designer and I can't help myself. So yeah, just a brief review of what we did last week. Again, here is our level layout. Right here is our basic character We have enemies that we put into the scene over here. These are our germ slime targets. And then we also made these germ spike targets. And you'll see over here on the right, in the inspector, we can see that both the slime targets and the spike targets have the same sphere collider rigid body target script. And the slime targets have a capsule collider because they're more oblong, and the rigid body and the target script. So these are the three elements that we really need to make sure that those are interacting, right? Interacting with the player. We looked also at this level layout object, which let us get into this corridor group and the room group, which lets us easily plunk down a bunch of game elements like the corridors and the rooms. And that's basically what we took care of last week, right? That's the basics of what we were working on. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and add to our scene some deeper interaction, right? So we're looking here in the prefabs folder, and we're looking for a folder called door and key. And here, once we see the door and key, these are two prefabs. Like I said, they've already been created for us with Unity. They already have some scripts and some basic mechanics on them, but we're going to put them in the scene. We're going to make sure that they work. We're going to test them, and I'm going to show you how to once you have a door and a key in the scene, how to get both of them to interact with each other. So the door is this fat blob object. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that into my scene. And what I want to do, and this is vaguely biological. We're basically going to give this character a heart attack by blocking one of these doors with this fat blob object. I'm moving my my slimes out of the way, my germs out of the way, just to make it easier. So we're going to go ahead and plug up that door with this fat blob. Now, you'll notice the door is open because I have a corridor connecting to it. We're going to plug in the fat blob, and it's very important. We need to make sure to rotate the fat blob so that it's facing the player, right? Since it looks like it's just about 180 degrees, I'm going to go ahead and type in 180 degrees here so that I get that nice crisp movement. And you'll notice that it rotates around this central axis, so I'm going to have to move it so that it plugs that door nicely. Once you've done this, it's important to go ahead and press play, get into your game, boop, 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 and double check that door actually does the work that you needed to do, right? So here we can see this door is in fact blocking, the door is in fact blocking the corridor. I can't get past it without a key. So testing that is really important. So,
and Alexei, it's really important to turn that around because you'll notice the green boxes there.
Yeah.
You got some colliders in there that are going to come into play when you go through how to create the key.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Brian. Yeah. So the smaller green box, that's the door. That's the collider that tells us where the door is in space. The bigger green box, this is an idea we're going to get back to later. The bigger green box is a volume collider, right? It tells the door when the player has touched that and allows the door to then do something when the player has touched it. So, So now, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and share back our slides again. And here's the list of steps that you can do at home if you're following along to go ahead and set up that door. So again, in the project window, you're going to go to Assets, Creator Kit FPS, Prefabs, look for that door and key folder. Drag the fat blob prefab from the project window into the scene view, position it so that it blocks the doorway, make sure that it's nice and snug, and then save and test it. Let's see. Yeah, so if you're having technical issues, definitely make sure that you're using that Q&A panel to get the attention of our moderators. They can help you with, I would say, probably 99.9% of your questions.
Answer that one about coding.
Yeah, so again, this session is specifically, we're not going to go over code. The FPS Creator Kit is about kind of basic interactions in Unity. So we're stick with us, actually stick with the beginner sessions, because next week we'll be doing a review of the work that we did on the FPS Creator Kit. The week after that, we're actually going to start a 3-week session where we are going to get into some basics of code. Somebody else asked, the assets in Unity are pink in the project window, but they place correctly in game. Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry about that. That's not a problem. Sometimes the thumbnail image doesn't render correctly, but as long as they're placing in game, that's perfectly fine. One last question. Somebody asks, how do we actually get these assets? One of my fantastic moderators, please go ahead and post the link to the FPS Connect assets in the chat in just a second. So, hopefully people will download that. Again, if you haven't downloaded that now, the download is going to take a minute. So just follow along until your download gets up to speed and then catch up. Or, watch the rest of the session and then go back and rewatch and follow along. I think that people are mostly done with getting the Fat Blob set up. So let's go ahead and move on, because now we get into using the key, which is pretty neat. Okay, so back in Unity, we've got our Fat Blob. Now we are going to put a key in the scene. Now, as a game designer, I'm never going to put a key in the same room that has the door that the key opens. That's not good design. I'm going to put the key somewhere else so that my player has to traverse my terrain. But for the purposes of our, for the purposes of the examples that we're doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and, for ease of testing, which is very important, I'm going to go ahead and just put this key in the same room. So you'll see here, all I did was, again, drag the key into the environment. I'm going to spin it around so that it's pointed at the player. And here in the inspector, we can see that the key has 3 simple components, right? A transform component that tells us where the key is in space, a box collider that tells us the edges of the key so that the player can pick it up by touching it, and then this key script. And the key script just has 2 elements, key type and key name text. And the key name text, that's actually what's showing up here. But the key type is important. The key type is the thing that we're going to use to associate the door with the key. So once we've dragged the key into our scene, it's very important that we go ahead and add something in this key type box. And it can be anything, right? We can call it key 1. I like to use pretty descriptive names. So I'm going to use brain door key, right? That tells me which door this key is associated with. But that's just for me, right? That's just a reminder for me, oh, this is the key that goes to the brain door. Now that we've done that, here are the steps that we're going to go through just in terms of getting the project window, set up. Go ahead. Again, we're still in that door and key folder, dragging the key prefab into the scene view, and then give your key a name in the key type field of the key component.
Alexei, you mentioned something about your naming conventions. I totally agree with you. If you were a game designer and you got hired on as a team and you inherited a project, probably want to have some good names and good descriptive names, like Alexei said, to inherit, because then you can tell where those things are supposed to go, what their functionality is. So yeah, I totally agree with you, man. That's an amazing point.
The sort of default that they suggest in this, in the tutorial is like key 1, and that's
key
great
1, yeah.
As long as there's just one key in your environment. Like if you key 1, maybe 2 keys, right? Key 1, key 2. Okay, that's not bad. But if you're building a complex level and it's got 5 doors and you have 5 keys, trying to remember which key is connected to which door gets really difficult. So,
and good names if everyone sticks around for that C#,
yes,
good names are going to come huge when we start getting into programming. So
true. Or even just next week, like show us what you're naming your different components. Oh, somebody asked a good question. How can you tell where the player is going to start from to orient the door? I will show you. So again, if we are in Unity, this is our scene, right? And we know that the player is actually, the easiest way to do this is we have this character object. If you go ahead and double click on that, it will actually it will zoom you to that character object. This empty, this empty capsule collider. This is the main character. This is the thing that represents the player in game. Since it's a first person shooter, the player doesn't really have a body. I think this object will animate some arms and a gun kind of like standing out in front of it, but in our representation it's not there's no body here. So but this shows us this is where the main character is going to start, and in fact the camera projection shows us which direction the main character is going to be looking at the beginning of the game. So right when you start the game, you know that you're going to be seeing this. And in fact, if you want to check it, you can go into the game tab, and this will show you the opening. This will show you the first thing that your player will see as soon as the game begins. Okay. I think most people, hopefully by now, have set up their keys. I'm going to move on. If I'm moving a little bit fast, let me know. But I think that I'd like to get us to the point where people can test out the door as well. So setting up the door, this is actually, it's pretty simple. So all we're going to do is we're going to click on this door, and we're going to see here that the door, right, we have a transform, position in space, we have a box collider, physical environment. We have this dissolve action script, which we'll see in a second what that does. The one that we're interested in here is the lock script. And the lock script, you'll see, has actually a pull down for key type, right? Remember, key type is the thing that we called, key type is the field where we gave our key the name brain door key. And the door is set up so that it can, if you click on this key type pull down, it'll show you, what are the keys that you want to associate with this door? And in this case, we want to say, okay, this is the brain door key. And so now that we've associated, I think, do we need to do anything? No, okay. So this actions list is the list of actions that the door will take when a player who has the key moves towards it. But it's already all set up for us. So all we need to do, again, is make sure that this key type field is associated with a specific door, or a specific key, rather. And then once we've done that, now when we play, we should actually be able to pick up the key and then move to the door and have the door open. So you'll see if I move to the door without the key, I get this message, key needed, brain door key, right? So the door knows which key it needs, and it's giving my player a message of which key it needs, which is great. Then over here, we have the key. The key says brain door key on it because that's the key type and that's what's getting put in the text. If I pick up that key, if I touch the key, I will have, the game recognizes that I've picked it up, and now when I move to the fat blob, you'll see it dissolves. And as soon as it's done dissolving, as soon as it's through the dissolve action, now I can move through that door. And that is exactly how easy it is to set up the door and key in the FPS Creator Kit, which is pretty great. So again, go ahead and select that fat blob object, set the key type value to your chosen name of the lock component, save and test your game.
There is a question there about that collider that we talked about before, that it is as a trigger. So That's actually a pretty good question. Not a small question, like the person says. Yeah.
So I would say that that's not a small question. The why can't you walk through the door in this example? Okay, so let us go ahead and look at the door object, and I will show you why you can't walk through it. So if we look at the fat blob, right? So the question is, why can't you walk through the door? Because this box collider is set to be a trigger. Now we're going to go into trigger volumes in just a second. So if you have questions about trigger volumes, hold off for just a minute because I will explain them. But you'll see that like usually if trigger is selected, what that means is that the player can't, or that the player can move through that object. It can move through that collider. The collider registers a collision, but it doesn't prevent player movement. But here we have one collider that's set to a trigger, but if you open the fat blob, you'll see one of these, I'm guessing, and I've never gotten, yeah, there we go. There's actually a child object inside the fat blob called the blocker, and that's just the box collider, right? And that just tells the fat blob object, hey, you know, the trigger volume on your parent object is a trigger. The collider on your parent object is a trigger, but on a child object, you have a collider that is not a trigger that will impede player movement, that will stop the player from moving through. So that's an easy way if you have an object and you want to say like, well, I want it to block player movement, but I also wanted to pay attention to whether or not the player is near it. You can set that up with parents and children so that the parent object is looking at, does the player get close? And a child object has the collider that's going to stop the player from moving through. Hopefully that answered that question. Okay. So now we have our door blocker set up. I really like that its eye is a keyhole. I think that's a great asset. We've got our key set up. So we have the door and the key connected to each other. So let's move forward, actually. Now that we've got all this stuff set up, we can kind of like block player progress and guide player progress. Now let's think about what do we need to do to end a level. And this is where we're going to get back into some of that trigger, that trigger volume idea that we used before. What we're going to do really quickly is we're going to build an empty game object, and I'm going to put it. So in my head, when I'm imagining this level, I think the way that I would want to structure it is the player would start here, would have to go to the stomach to do something, and then go back through the level to the heart and have the game end at the heart. But I don't want to build all of that right now. I just want to test this level end trigger. So I'm going to put the level end trigger here inside this corridor, which is like from a design standpoint, not a great place to put it. But again, we're just testing it right now. So don't worry too much about it. The important thing is we're going to build a trigger that's going to let us put a volume such that when the player touches it, they end the level. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an empty game object. So this is a game object, as you can see here, this is a game object. All it has is a transform. It's literally just a point in space. And as we rotate around, we can see that it didn't get put inside that corridor like I want it to. So we're going to need to move it until it's nicely kind of nestled in that corridor. And this can be a little bit tricky because we're seeing a two-dimensional representation of three-dimensional space. It's really easy to sort of like place it in the wrong place. So do make sure that you're kind of like checking from all the angles, dragging around so that you can really see, okay, this thing is actually in the corridor now, which is right where we want it. We're going to name this level end, right? This is going to be our level end object. And we're going to add a box collider component. And right now, and we're going to expand that box collider so that it fills this room. And we can use, in order to expand it, we can do that a couple different ways. We can drag these size arrows to change the size of the box collider. right? So X, Y, and Z will actually just let me like change the size of the box collider. Or if I click Edit Collider, I'll get these handles, which will let me go ahead and just kind of manipulate the size of the box collider one side at a time, which can be really useful. I'm going to move. Oh, it didn't. I want to call this level end. I'm going to move it so it's a little bit more centered. There we go. And for now, I want to test just to make sure that the box collider is there and that the player can collide with it, right? So we haven't even made it a trigger volume yet. I'm going to grab the key, ignore these bugs, destroy the door, walk through. And if everything goes according to plan, I'm not going to be able to enter this hallway. Yeah, there we go. See, so that collider volume is stopping my progress, which is what we want for now. We're going to fix that in a second. But for now, we just want to get that set up. So, oh no, we do want to add the is trigger. Okay, so go ahead and add that. Click on that is trigger button, and then do add the component end checkpoint. And I can show you guys what that looks like. I thought this was 2 steps, but it's 1. So here, again, like you saw, the box collider as it is now will stop player movement. If I click is trigger, now, just like the door, when the player moves into that volume, their movement won't be impeded. They will be able to continue to move, but that volume still sends up a trigger event. It sends up a collision event, and other things can pay attention to that event and react to them. And so we're going to add that level end component. What's it called? It's called end checkpoint. So add the component end checkpoint here. And all that script is going to do is when the player touches that volume, we're going to end the level. So now that it's all set up, we can grab the key, open the door. That door animation takes a long time. I might want to speed that up. Boop, there we go. Right, I moved into that trigger volume, and as you can see, it ended the level. Here's my final score. I did not destroy any of the targets, et cetera, and I can restart or go on to the next level. Okay. So, yeah, let me put up the list of steps that you want to do. So again, you made that level end object. We want to adjust the size of it by using the Edit Collider button or the size parameters in the box collider. Check is trigger, and go ahead and add that end checkpoint component. Like I said before, this technique of using trigger volumes is really central to Unity and really one of the most powerful design tools that you have at your disposal. So, the door is a good example of a trigger volume that activates a reaction from the game. The end level is another good trigger volume. But if you start thinking about it, it's really easy to see how lots and lots of the games that we play have some type of trigger volume kind of set up in the game that will let the game trigger an action when a player has moved to a certain spot. Maybe with some conditions, depending on exactly what you're trying to do, but don't underestimate how powerful or useful those trigger volumes can be. QA looks good. Somebody asked where the level end object is. Remember that you're making the level end object. So we're going to start by making an empty object, renaming it to level end, adding a box collider component, and then moving that object to the end of your level. So you've created that level end object, and then when you build it, when it's moved to where you want it to be, you want to go ahead and edit the size of the collider if you need to, make sure that it's a trigger, and add that end checkpoint component. Let us move forward. We are making good time. I will try this is creating the player weapon is a lot of fun. So I'm
Oh yeah, now to the fun part.
I'm going to dive right in. Okay, so we're gonna make a new player weapon. So this is a really again, we're using a lot of the stuff that the FPS Creator Kit has already. We can see here in prefabs, we already have a bunch of weapons set up. The Germoblaster, the Helomatic 500, and Pill. But in this case, I think what we're going to do is we are actually going to use one of these weapons as the basis for another weapon that we're going to be able to customize. So the first thing we want to do is select the Germoblaster, and you can either cut and paste, so control or copy and paste, Control C, Control V, or you can press Control D to duplicate. And now we have a Germoblaster and the Germoblaster 1, right? Both of these are prefab objects. They're both objects that Unity has sort of saved as, hey, these are objects that I'm going to want to use over and over again. And because they're prefabs, you'll see that they have a little bit of a different layout in the inspector. So if we want to edit a prefab, the easiest way now is to open the prefab, and this takes us to a special prefab editor. This lets us actually get into the prefab and build stuff in the prefab. So the first thing I want to do is to differentiate the Germoblaster from our new weapon. Let's go ahead and rename our weapon. And I like to throw this out to the chat. Who has a good name for our weapon? Remember that this is a sci-fi game where we have been shrunk down to micro size, and we are
Germ
fighting
Blaster.
Germs. Somebody says Germ Blaster. That's not very different from the Germoblaster. Antibody Shotgun I like. Germinator is good. Oh, the Scrubber. That's good. Corona. Nice.
Blaster.
Man, I like the Scrubber a lot. I think it sounds menacing. I'm gonna go with that one. So let's see, whose suggestion was that? Elian Osiris Luna Gaxiol. Thank you so much. That's quite a name. Okay, the Scrubber. So now, again, we've created our new weapon. We have, we've renamed it, and that's, again, for this step, that's all we need to worry about. But I'm going to show the steps on screen just so that, if you weren't stepping through at exactly the same time as me, now you can see. So remember to, and this is really important, remember to make sure that you are in the prefabs folder. All of these objects have another version in the art folder, right? Because we want access to the models, but the models don't have any of the code, any of the scripts that will make them function. So be really careful that you are in the prefabs folder working with the Germoblaster prefab and not the Germoblaster art model, which is just the rig. It's just the kind of art of it with none of the engineering, with none of the mechanics. So we're going to select the Germoblaster prefab in the prefabs folder. Again, assets, creator kit, FPS, prefabs, weapons, making a copy using Control D or Command D. You can also Control C, Control V to cut and paste, and then just rename the new weapon. I went into the prefab editor. You can just double click on the weapon name. If you do the slow 2 clicks on the weapon name, you can just rename it there. So either way is fine. Seems like people are... Somebody says they can't copy the blaster.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what that could be. If you have the blaster selected, as long as you're in the right folder, if you have the blaster selected, you should be able to Control D or Command D if you're, depending on whether you're on a Windows or a Mac. You could also try just right click and see if it brings up a copy paste menu. Oh, interesting. Control C, Control V doesn't work. Control D does work. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, Control D does duplicate.
Okay. Rename file. So yeah, and then if you rename it in the prefab, it'll ask you to double check Okay, Control-C, Control-V. On my machine, Control-C, Control-V does not duplicate the weapon. So you would want to use Control-D to duplicate. Again, you can also... oh no, I guess this menu does not have a duplicate option. I would have thought. Okay. So once you have duplicated that weapon and renamed it, now we're going to go ahead and modify the weapon behavior, and you'll see that. And I'll be in my Unity in just a second, but you'll see that in prefab we have this thing called the weapon script. This tells us a lot about what the weapon is and how it works. And this is the stuff that we're going to change in order to get the weapon to work the way that we want it to. So let's see what that looks like. So again, we are inside now the newly renamed scrubber, which I really like. Oh, something you'll notice. Remember how I said that the player object doesn't have it doesn't have anything like a body? Notice the arms for the character are actually part of the weapon, right? They're part of the weapon rig, so that when you bring up the weapon, the right arms come up. That's very clever. Okay, so we're here inside the scrubber. We're inside the prefab. Okay, so we're in the prefab editor. You can tell that it's a prefab editor because it puts the scrubber kind of alone on this like big empty plane. That's how we know that we're looking at the scrubber itself. That's how we know that we're looking at the prefab. Here, we're going to look at the weapon script. So there's a bunch of different parameters, and I encourage you guys to figure out kind of how you want to make this weapon work for you. I'm going to set this up so we can set the trigger from auto to manual. Auto means that as long as the trigger button is held down, it'll fire. Manual means that each time I want to fire, I have to press the trigger button. We can switch the weapon type from raycast to projectile. A raycast, for people who aren't familiar, a raycast basically like when you click the button, a raycast draws an invisible line from the barrel to a target and does damage to that target, versus a projectile which actually spawns an object on screen, which then moves to a position and does damage. I'm going to switch this to the projectile. We can play around with fire rate. We can play around with reload time, clip size, damage, ammo type. I'm going to say that this is a pill. Now, this is important. In order to get the projectile to work, we have to fill this projectile prefab slot. So it's looking for an object called a projectile, right? And here we have the pill projectile, which is on the projectile layer and has the projectile script. So this is the important thing. The scrubber needs something with the projectile script to fill this projectile prefab slot. And since we set the weapon type to projectile, you'll notice if I go back to raycast, that projectile type field, it just goes away, right? It only exists if I put the weapon type to projectile. Now, the projectile prefab, we can go ahead and drag the pill projectile into and drop it in that field, and it will associate that field with that pill projectile. So now every time we press the button, it's going to spawn one of these pill projectile objects because we told it to. Projectile launch force 200. When I was testing this, 200 is very low, actually. It seems like a lot, but it's really not. So I would put it up to 600 to start with. I also like the idea of making the fire rate faster, which I believe in this case means lowering this number. So let's do this. Let's put this to 0.05. I'm making a weird like multi-grenade launcher. It's going to be exciting. So now that we've set it, so okay, let's stop there and go ahead and let you guys catch up so that everybody's gotten a chance to play around with the weapon types. And again, if you feel like you want to do something else with your weapon, go crazy, go for it. The one thing I will say though is that drag and drop, right? Associating a prefab or a game object with a slot in a weapon, that's something that you're going to see over and over again in Unity, right? It's very, very common that in Unity we say, hey, we have a field we want to connect. Like anytime you're instantiating an object, one of the easiest ways to do that is you tell a script, I want to instantiate an object, and then in the inspector, you drag that object and drop it in that field, and Unity makes that association so that now when you're going to instantiate that object, it knows which object to instantiate, which prefab to instantiate. Somebody asks, what are ways to do that other than drag and drop? There's a way, there are ways to code that in your scripts, usually by finding objects by type or by finding objects in the hierarchy. But yeah, right now we're just covering drag and drop. Again, when the beginner series continues, we will be getting into C# and we might touch on that.
And Alexei, I'm going to add, you can also do that with that, I don't know if you can see it on the screen there next to the barrel and that little, I call it target, but you can hit that little radio button right there to choose. It brings up another menu, but it allows you to assign that object in that scene as well. It depends on the type as well.
This is the picker, right? This will open this little menu and let you grab whatever objects, and it looks only for legal objects, which is nice. So if you open this this picker, it will let you see what your objects are. Okay. Hopefully everybody has gotten their weapon modified. I do want to move fast because we need to get into building stuff. So the last thing we need to do is we need to make that weapon available to the player. So in order to do that, what we're actually going to do, we need to get out of this, get out of the prefab inspector, and we can do that by clicking the scenes button. And then if we look at the character,
if you go ahead and go to the controller script, and there's a starting weapons.
That's it. Okay.
Expanding that. There you go.
In our controller script, so this is the character controller script, right? Of course, this is the thing that gives us a whole bunch of information about how the character moves around and how the character interacts with the environment, including this set of starting weapons. So again, in the set of starting weapons, you can see this is actually an array for people who are sort of familiar with that terminology. So this has a list of elements, and we can adjust the size of the array by changing the size value. So if I set this from 3 to 4, you'll see that I grow a new element in this array. And then, again, just like before, all I need to do is drag the scrubber and drop it into that 4th element. So now that we've done that, if we test, we can actually see that the player comes into play. So this is our Helomatic 500, that's the Germoblaster, this is the pill, and then this is the scrubber. And as you can see, I actually have built the weapon so that it fires these projectiles pretty much the way I wanted to. It's kind of an auto grenade launcher. Just what I wanted. Who doesn't love an auto grenade launcher, really? Yeah, so again, it's all we need to do is we need to alter that starting weapons array. So in the character game object, in the controller component, you want to expand that starting weapons field. Change the size from 3 to 4. Drag the new weapon prefab into the last element field. You put it somewhere else if you wanted to, and then press play to test your weapon. Hopefully everyone is coming up with really cool weapons for us to look at next week. Because we are definitely running up against the end of our time, I do want to move forward. If you are finding that we've gone a bit too fast, I apologize. Please feel free to look up. This is going to be posted momentarily, I think pretty soon after it's done. Please feel free to look up the video for this session, rewatch it, and see anything that you missed. But here, all we're going to do, we're going to build our game. So again, this is a pretty basic, important part of Unity, which is how to make your game something that other people can consume and play. So we're going to start by saving what we've done. It's very important. Make sure that you save all your work. Then we're going to go to this build settings. Now, here in the build settings, it's vital. This scenes in build window, this tells us what is going to be in our build. So it's really, really important that we go ahead and click Add Open Scene so that the scene that we just made is in this build. That just means that we can actually build what we've created. If we had multiple levels, those would each be individual scenes that we're building, that we would have to add to this scenes and build to build out to make the game. Right now, we want to build to PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. So this is what we're going to be actually hosting and playing and checking. And here's our kind of some of the basic tweaks that we can make. Right now, everything's set pretty much the way we want it to. As soon as we have this all set up, we just want to go ahead and click Build. And when you click Build, you'll see this takes you to a new window that is your project window for this project. The one thing I would say is go ahead and make a new folder and call it Builds, and then build inside that folder. That's important because while it doesn't look like it, here we're only seeing the folders. There's actually a bunch of files in here, and if you build in here, your build files will get lost inside the other files in this project. So you want to make a new folder called Builds. You can call it PC Build. You can call it whatever you want to. Make a new folder called Builds, and then go ahead and actually build your file there. And I'm not going to build right now because it takes a second and it's pretty resource intensive. But you would just click Select Folder to start that build process.
Alexei, also, when you do build, you get, especially for a PC, you get another folder in there that you have to access to, and that'll also get lost.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a great tip. Great tip for you to build a different folder.
I actually usually do a builds folder and then a subfolder for each individual build that I'm doing. So that's, if you want to get that specific, you can. Again, save your scene, go to build settings, click add open scenes. This is really important. If you're clicking build and nothing's happening, make sure that you have a scene that you're building. Click the build button, make a new folder called builds, and then go ahead and finalize your build and start building. Then our last game element, the last thing that we're going to be doing, because we are going to be, so as of next week, we're going to be taking the games that you guys have built and we're going to be reviewing them and we're going to be talking about them as we kind of round out this FPS Creator Kit. So this step is very important. We want you to share your games with us so that we can actually play them. In the builds folder, you can zip that folder using your preferred method. You can use WinZip, you can use 7-zip, there's a bunch of different zip utilities that are all good. Do go ahead, itch.io is an easy way to host your game. If you go there, you'll have to make a free account. But it's pretty easy to upload the files, and Itch will create a little landing page where people can download your game and play it. So definitely take this step, go to itch.io and upload your game. And then finally, I'm going to leave this up for a second. Do please submit that itch.io page to our Unity Creator Kit. And that will let us look at your game, that'll let us play it, and like I said, we'll be giving feedback next week. I'm really, really excited to get to see the games that you guys are building.
And please make sure that you get all the files in that build folder.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're missing something, if you're missing one of them, or if you're missing the folder that gets created when you're doing that, it's going to be hard for us to play those amazing games that you guys are going to submit.
That is pretty much all the content. There are a couple questions I want to answer. Manjaneth asks, can we build for multiple platforms at one go? So if we look at that build, if we look at that the build settings, so PC, Mac, and Linux standalone is like one specific setting. So all of those you can build. You press this button, you will build something that will work on any of those, which is really exciting. Then for other platforms, you actually have to usually download a module and then switch platform. But all of these are available as things that Unity can build to. But Unity won't naturally build to multiple of these platforms at once.
And before we get out of here, let me just mention one more thing, that we make sure you guys are connecting or joining the Unity Connect group for Creator Kit FPS.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great way to get some questions answered and some support from now until our next session. So make sure you get to that. That link was at the beginning of the chat.
Any last minute questions? Somebody's asking to go over the new weapons stuff. So I'll do that. This is a review. I'll do that really quickly. So basically, we want to click on a weapon and then press Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac to duplicate the weapon. Go into the prefabs folder, edit the weapon, edit any of the weapon properties that you want to edit. Make sure that you associate it with a projectile if it's a projectile type weapon. I'm going to set this from manual back to auto. I think that an auto grenade launcher is fun. And then just save it. And then you can add it to the player's starting weapons by editing this size component here in the starting weapons array. I think that is just about the time that we have allotted. Thank you all for staying, people who stayed past 11. Like I said, I am so excited to see the work that you guys are doing and to get a chance to play around with it next week. And yeah, I hope that everyone will go ahead and join us again for our next session.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much.